And tonight we are talking about Nicolas Roeg's Walkabout. So first, a synopsis. Based on a novel called The Children, written by James Vance Marshall from 1959. The film Walkabout mostly deviates from it beyond it's about two white children in the Australian outback and their interactions with an Aborigine boy. In the book, I guess it's two American children who survive a plane crash. And I guess one of the thoughts why they would have changed that is because of Lord of the Flies, which had come out in 1963, which is actually a future Criterion film we'll be discussing. So story-wise, it's about a white teenage schoolgirl played by Jenny Agutter and her little brother, played by the son of the director, Luke Roeg, who survive attempted murder, kind of going back to Chris Benoit, by their father after he's driven the family out to the Australian outback for a picnic in the middle of nowhere. So he tries killing them, and he then turns the gun on himself after he fails to kill them, and sets the family Volkswagen on fire, leaving brother and sister alone, kind of to their own devices. The brother and sister proceed to make their way across the great outback, looking for civilization, a way to get out of there so they can go home, I'm assuming. And because all they have at this point are what they brought with their picnic, which is a little bit of water, a little bit of food, and that's really not going to last very long. Their lips are getting drier and feet are getting swollen. The little brother is getting worse for wear, but they do manage to come across a kind of an oasis in this great desert. They think they can set up there for a little while. There's water, there's some berries to eat, so they should all be good. But because it's the harsh, unforgiving elements, that water evaporates in the course of the morning, and they're kind of left just with the shade of one single tree that now has far less leaves because they've fallen off, and they're just going to lie there pretty well waiting for death to come or someone to come rescue them. Well, their savior comes in the form of a indigenous Aboriginal boy who is out on his walkabout. In case you didn't know, the film, other than the title's called Walkabout, or don't know what Walkabout is, the film actually kind of tells you what that is with an opening credits kind of introduction to the concept, which is basically it's a rite of passage that Indigenous male Australians take from anywhere from age 10 to 16, where they live in the wilderness for up to a half a year or to a year as a means to achieve spiritual and traditional transition to adulthood. So there's obviously a lack of communication between the colonial white kids and the Aboriginal kid, since they don't speak one another's language. So those they can try to do is suss out what they're trying to say by making gestures and yelling loudly at one another. So the Aboriginal boy, he's played by actor David Golpilil, I think is how it would be said. So he helps the two siblings survive in this hostile environment while he is on his own walkabout journey. What survival in this environment mean is the hunting and killing of a kangaroo and several hundred animals of various sizes. We get what essentially boils down to a various just sets of scenes of them kind of making their trek across the outback. They're not, at some point they just kind of don't even try to find civilization anymore. They seem to be pretty content and happy living there, just because the indigenous boy kind of can make it work for the three of them, and they kind of get to live in this sort of idyllic sort of state, just wandering around from site to site. And then it's sort of like an elliptical pacing, intercutting of just the time that they're there. We don't really ever get a sense of how long they've been there for. We get scenes of a tribe of indigenous people coming across the remnants of the burnt out Volkswagen, and they've taken the body of murder dad and put him in a tree. We get a scene with a Australian plantation that just seems to hire indigenous people, dye their hair blonde, and have them make authentic tourist trinkets that they then sell off. We get a strange scene of a hot weather balloon station and some sex-starved field scientists. We get some sunbathing naked children. There's no shortage of flies and other insects. This idyllic life eventually comes to an end when the failure to communicate and rejection collide, and the darkness of this world befalls all, and you are left with questions of what the hell this was all about in the first place. I guess I'll mention that the screenwriter, Edward Bond, he was a playwright who only worked on a handful of films, such as Nicolas and Alexandra. He wrote some dialogue for Antonioni's Blow Up, and he wrote an adaptation of Nabokov's Laughter in the Dark. And then for the most part, he just went back into playwriting and television, stuff like that. I won't delve too much into Nicolas Roeg today because he'll come up later on, and maybe we'll talk more about him as we watch more of his films. But RJ, at this point, I will hand it off to you because there's been much alluding to Walkabout from you as this comes at number 10 in the spine count. And you watched this only a couple months ago for the very first time. And I guess we'll get your thoughts on it at this point.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This has been long coming. I don't know if it's going to live up to the hype. But as I alluded to a little bit in the end of last week's episode, this is the one film I refuse to watch. I won't ever watch this movie again. And the reason for that, I think you mispronounced the title to this movie. It's not Nick Roeg's Walkabout. It's Nick Roeg's snuff film Walkabout. I think this movie is fucking horrible. It is a disgusting show of pretension. It's fucking horrible. So the point you kind of glossed over that I'll stress why I don't like this movie is that when they're shown the ways to survive in the wilderness by like the indigenous boy, you get a montage of about 20 minutes basically of just him killing, clubbing, torturing, and basically dismantling live animals on the screen. And it's not movie magic, folks.
It's not movie magic.
Is clubbing to death countless animals. He starts with the slow and I can only imagine torturous death of a kangaroo, taking several sharp spears to the side until eventually getting basically throttled by the young man. Then you see him clubbing wombats. I think there's a koala in there.
I don't know if he kills a wombat.
There's a point. So there's a point where he throws an animal on the fire to get the blood for sunscreen. I'm pretty sure that might be a wombat.
It was a hog.
A hog?
Yeah.
Okay, well, hogs, whatever, man. He kills like fucking, like, what would you even guess? Like 30 animals, maybe?
Well, I think I said several hundred, but yeah, it had to have been at least like over a dozen.
Yeah. So like at least a dozen, and like, yeah. You can argue things like, well, he was like actually eating these animals and stuff like that. And okay, sure, fuck, whatever. But it's fucking stupid, man. I absolutely hate fucking movies like this. And this one in particular because they actually did it. But, so I'll go out here and just state that I am also a big hypocrite because I'm not like a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan or anything like that. And I'm not trying to be like a militant animal rights activist or anything like that. But I just fucking can't stand the way animals are used in movies, especially like movies like this. And it's actually one of the reasons I have a really big problem with pretty much almost 90% of horror movies, is because a lot of the time you'll get a scene where, you know, the family dog dies or the cat winds up dead. And it's just a really cheap cliche trope to like play on people's sympathies to get them like feeling like sad for some reason. Like, I don't know, or I know why they do it, but I don't know why it's so prevalent. Like why people feel they need to do it. Like they just throw it in there as like some cheap thing. Going back to Walkabout. So I know why. I think I know why Nick Roeg does it in this movie. He's trying to show this like contrast between like life in the city versus like life in the wild. And you even get that little scene where it's like after you watch the indigenous guy for 20 minutes like struggling to like catch these animals and club them, you see like a white guy in like a Humvee just shoot like a water buffalo or something, and he rewinds it and plays it again, and he rewinds it and plays it again, and it just like keeps going, and it's like this weird juxtaposition or contrast that he's trying to do, but I don't think it works. I think I see what he's trying to do, but I think it has the opposite effect. I think it glamorizes like animal cruelty. That's at least what I think like he's doing here. I don't know. I hate it. Like I hate movies like this. Last year you gave me Cannibal Holocaust, which I very thankfully had a animal free version that you could select right off the start.
Courtesy of the Grindhouse releasing Blu-ray.
Yeah, exactly. I would prefer that. Like, so the other thing too is like I understand like in the 70s and like before that, it wasn't like a big deal. Like that was the problem I had with Polanski's Macbeth too. Ooh, fuck! I forgot about that. I'll rewatch that one. But like, there's a scene in that where there's like bears fighting dogs, and then like you don't see them fight, but in the next scene you see them like dragging the bear and dogs like out of the room, and it's like it looks really real. Like I'm pretty sure they just killed those dogs and like that bear just for that scene. So what was I even talking about? Oh yeah. So like movies like 70s and pre like that, it didn't, I guess it wasn't a big deal to like kill animals on scene or for whatever reason, but I think it is now. It's not something you could ever do now. And like I understand like the preservation of cinema history and stuff like that, but to be very honest, like I don't think they should keep re-releasing this movie unless they take out that stuff. And then people get all mad. They're like, well, you can't like take away like artistic expression or like it's already happened, stuff like that. But if it was up to me, I wouldn't even have this movie as like an option. I just wouldn't have it.
Right.
Or anything like that. So I don't know. I've been kind of jammering for a while. I think people understand like my stance on this. I don't know if you want to add comments, critique, or
okay.
Or a response, I guess.
Okay. I'm trying to think the best way of tackling this. So I mean, like I knew what you were going to talk about. We never actually talked about this movie specifically, but you've made your feelings on like the depictions of like animal cruelty, simulated or unsimulated, before. I know them, so I knew that was going to be an issue. And like honestly, until you watched this movie for the first time a few months ago, like I did not remember this stuff at all from when I watched this. Like this was like one of the first like Criterion films I might have watched, like because they had a copy of this at like it was like Video Gallery, and I think I would have watched the VHS tape of it. Because I was like looking this up, and like Roger Ebert was actually quite the champion for this movie. Like in 1971, he gave it a 4-star review, and then like when it got the movie went away like for a really long time. Like no one really talked about it. It wasn't really available, and it was edited. But actually not due to the animal violence, which I will get back to. So it was, but it just like kind of had fallen out of fashion, and then it got kind of put together, and then started kind of making the circuit again, kind of in like the mid '90s, and then I think his Great Movies review came out in '97, and then like. Because like it had just been re-released, and then like the following year, '98 is when the Blu-ray or the DVD, the first Criterion DVD came out. And so like my experience of that with the movie was kind of like, I mean, the Outback has sort of this like real mystical kind of vibe to it. Like pretty well like it's like the shorthand way of like new age sort of thinking about the world. It seems to really come down to like sort of like lots of like white guys kind of misappropriating like the way like the like Aboriginal people there kind of think about like the waking time or dream time sort of stuff. And like Grant Morrison talks about it in like the Invisibles comics, and like that was kind of like this sort of idea of like Australia. And like I guess I was always drawn to like survival stories and this sort of idea of like nature versus like civilization. And that was the thing that initially drawed me into that movie. So when I watched that movie for the first time, and I'm thinking this would have been like probably I was still in high school. I loved this movie. Like I thought it was just like really great and like beautiful to look at, and like totally unlike anything else I'd ever seen. And like in the context of like how we're watching this stuff in the Criterion Collection, it's like the first real like art house movie we've watched, I think.
Right.
Like where it is like its structure like really is like more poetic than is like a straight narrative, because like it's like I was reading the one essay that's in with the Blu-ray, and it's just like boils down to, it's like you could show this movie to people who don't speak English and they would be able to visually follow along. Like it's got like it's like it has a storybook sort of like clarity in its narrative, I guess. Like there's like not a lot to it. I mean, I don't even know if like the boy and girl have names. I don't think they do.
I don't think they. I think it's boy and girl.
Yeah. So I mean, that was my initial like that's my memory of Walkabout, was like watching it like on VHS, and I really liked it a lot. I picked up the DVD at a later point, and I don't think I ever have managed to watch that movie again since then. Like I'd start watching it, and then I kind of have lost interest in it at a certain point. And like, so it's been years and years and years. But then you graciously donated your copy on Blu-ray to me after you watched it, as you had no use for it anymore. And then at some point, I had this great idea. It's like, hey, RJ, we should do a podcast about Criterion films. And it's like, yeah, that sounds great, Jarrett. And then of course it's like, oh, what's disc volume 10? Oh, Walkabout.
Walkabout.
Yeah. So we came to that point. So I'm just going to talk about, like, we will definitely talk about the animal cruelty aspect. I've been trying to figure out my take on it, because I kind of find myself in this unenviable position of like defending animal cruelty, which I don't want to. I don't think I can, but I will just kind of talk about the things I like about this movie.
Sure.
The opening credits are amazing. They reminded me a lot of like the it's like the Koyaanisqatsi films. It's like these kind of like long abstracted shots of like civilization and like walled surfaces and brick walls, and these like this great like 70s font of Walkabout, and the weird like sort of mixture of like the John Barry score with the like didgeridoo. It's like amazing. Like it's just like a totally interesting way to start your movie open. That's what I will say. There's a one shot in the movie that I think like is fantastic, and I don't know if like a lot of people pick up on it from when I was reading. Maybe it's so obvious no one bothers with it, but there's this great scene when dad is kind of like reading a newspaper, and he's kind of looking over the like deck of his house, and he's got his two children, and they're playing in a swimming pool, but like directly beside the swimming pool is the ocean. And like I think it's like this amazing like just like simple way of just talking about how moderated our life is, I guess. And I mean, it really sets up like the rest of like the metaphors that the film kind of is presenting. The one thing that like I really loved about this when I was watching it again, the thing I recalled immediately was the insects and the flies. Like the way that the movie's shot, like it's kind of like the cinematic way that if people are familiar with like Mike Mignola comics, how like his page layouts with like Hellboy and stuff like that, he has these like shots of like he'll focus on these little details like gargoyles or like little like weird like things like faces, statues around a space, and he'll just like kind of have little panels representing those things, and it creates this atmosphere. That's basically what like I think, I don't know, he probably is a Nick Roeg fan, and like that he's trying to represent that in like a comic, which is like on a flat 2-dimensional page, and in a film like it's kind of like it's like a monorail where you get to experience those things not by like your eyes kind of floating over a page and you pick up on details, but like you are being driven along Nick Roeg's like editing vision of what this film's going to be about. And I mean, it's just, and he's just creating this like uncompromising world that these children find themselves in. And I mean, so he's a British filmmaker. I mean, he was making a film in Australia, so he's looking at this film from the outside. But I think one thing that I think people do agree with in Australia is that it's like, if you don't like big monster bugs and things that can kill you, probably
Yeah.
don't want to live in Australia because it's like probably one of the most like inhospitable places. Like even in the cities, like there's these like monster creatures can like be hanging from your tree and stuff like that.
Right.
In the part of the world that we find ourselves in, we don't really we don't get that at all. We get like the occasional story of like a badger in somebody's backyard. And like or like some like an animal comes out of like the mountain down from the mountains and it's like definitely not
Hmm.
supposed to be where it's supposed to be, but I think in Australia that's like a regular day occurrence.
Yeah.
So going along with that, yeah, so there's like the horror of this film right from the get-go. I mean, the whole scene with dad like just like firing at his kids. There's even this like sort of like apocalyptic sort of like text that is there because there's this whole thing where he's like looking through these like notes from work about like geological reports and stuff like that. And he's like looking at this information, and it seems like at that point he's either been planning this or he's like been waiting for the last bit of data to come in because there's something that's going to happen. He thinks, and that's what he's like. Instead of like having himself and his children live through this world, he's going to kill them and himself rather than see that.
Right.
That's sort of like my take on it because there's like when there's like that radio that they do keep when they're going through the desert initially, you get these weird things about like sort of like, oh, there's some like it's all murmurs of like earthquakes and geological stuff that's happening back in regular society. But I mean that's like sort of a constant backdrop in the world. But it's sort of like that sort of thing that like if a person's like mentally unstable, and that's the sort of stuff that people's brains can get kind of caught on, and they can really hone in on that and become extremely dangerous. But there's no way to prevent that. It's just sort of like the chaotic state that even like modern society can produce.
Yeah.
My next note was Jenny Agutter and coming of age. Like this
Yeah.
film has quite the leering camera throughout, which is lots of like borderline upskirt shots and lots of longing, loving takes of her legs. I guess when she was initially cast for the movie, she was 14 years old, but by the time they actually shot the movie, she was 17 years old. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. I have a note here on animal cruelty, but we'll just talk about that as one big thing. There's another scene that I really remember this time was like the scene where her little brother is licking the salt out of her hands. It's just like the weirdest, like, man, that's just like something is off-putting about that. Yeah,
It's weird.
I'll leave it at that. So this will kind of fold into the animal cruelty thing. But so our indigenous boy, David Gulpilil, he became sort of a celebrity after this movie. So I'll kind of read a little bit about him. So he is a Yolngu man of the Mandhal Pungundi speech of the Dinjba language. As a young boy, yep, sure. This is right off Wikipedia, so I check my sources and such. Gopilo was an accomplished hunter, tracker, and ceremonial dancer. Unlike many indigenous people of his generation, Gopilo spent his childhood in the bush, outside the range of non-Aboriginal influences. There, he received a traditional upbringing in the care of his family. He attended the school at Maningrida in the Australia's northeast and Arnhem Land. When he came of age, Gopilo was initiated into the tribe group. His skin group totemic animal is the eagle, and his homeland is Maru. After appearing in his first film, he added English to several indigenous languages in which he was already fluent. So in 1969, so 2 years before Walkabout was released, his skill as a tribal dancer caught the attention of British filmmaker Nick Roeg, who had come to Maningrida scouting locations for the forthcoming film. Roeg promptly cast the 16-year-old unknown to play a principal role in Walkabout. His on-screen charisma combined with his acting and dancing skills was such that he became an instant national and international celebrity. I love this bit. He traveled to distant lands, mingled with famous people, and was presented to heads of state. During these travels to promote his film, he met and was impressed with John Lennon, Bob Marley, Muhammad Ali, and Bruce Lee. Like, right. Oh, you know what? I guess I'd be impressed with them too.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, man, I read that. I was just like, so like this just seems like nothing changes in like hundreds of years. Or it's like, let's take this brown boy and cart him around and show him to heads of state like he's a collector's item. Yeah, but he does appear in the film Crocodile Dundee 2.
What? As who? As a crocodile?
I guess as a person who lives in Australia, which would be accurate.
Weird, man.
Oh, he's in lots of movies. We're going to see him again. When we get to Peter Weir's Last Wave, yeah, he's there, man, my friend. He's not going away.
For some reason, I really thought that he was like, I thought they just got like an actual guy.
They did.
Like,
well, that's,
yeah. I didn't know he turned into a movie star though.
Yeah, no, he like, I mean,
that's news to me.
Oh yeah, no, he's around for the next like 30 years, and I guess like he had some like, I don't know, some issues with the laws, like it's like domestic abuse sort of stuff and like drinking stuff. It's just, it sounds like dark crap that happens.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, but so there is that idea that like he is sort of like, if someone were to defend the animal cruelty, it's like, well, it was done by an actual person, that this is a part of their way of life. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So the one scene that like that hot weather balloon research station scene in the movie, I feel is like really out of place. Like when it hit,
make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense to me, other than it sets up a balloon going up so they can find it later. Like it's just like so strange. Like they didn't need it. Like that scene just it is like, honestly, it's like one of the most baffling scenes in all the movies we've watched so far. Where it's like, what is that? Like I don't get a feel. I don't get a good feel for that scene at all. The tourist junk manufacturing plantation scene, I thought was like super disturbing. I found it really like, god damn, did they actually like, is this a real place that they just shot like while they were scouting and they just filmed it? Like it feels like legit. Like it feels like that is like a real way of life there, and it's like, like everyone just looks like terrible and like just exploitative. Oh man, that scene was rough for me. The scene with the hunters, the Caucasian hunters with their guns. My cat had come into the room and he was looking at the television screen very concerned.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah,
I wouldn't show this in front of my cats.
Yeah,
I don't want to corrupt them.
No,
they're innocent little cat brains.
I hear you. During the Indigenous boys, I guess you call it his mating dance.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but recall WWF wrestler Papa Shango.
Yeah, okay.
Just look it up.
Close enough.
Look it up.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the kind of that final scene in the film where the girl is all grown up and she's married to her young husband, and she thinks longingly back onto her life, and you get the whole like just like the silliness of modern life. Like it's like I think the film is effective in the sense that like it really like it shows how like absurd like human like our life, our civilization is. Like, because when she first comes to that town with her brother, and there's like the uptight like Australian man who just like can't be like troubled to help her at all. It's just like, yeah, that's kind of how it would actually be. It wouldn't be like, oh my god, you're the missing children. Like, I can't believe we found you. It's like, no, this guy would just be like, yeah, what do you want from me? Why are you bothering me?
He's like, don't touch my stuff.
Yeah. So on to the bigger thing that's here in front of us. Okay, so the thing I wrote here was, is animal cruelty ever justified? To which I wrote, no.
No. It's not.
Like, so, I mean, everything I tried finding about people who are fans of this movie, like just to see like what they have to say about this, people do seem to try to avoid talking about that as much as possible. Like, they just don't want to talk about it. I listened to the commentary track, which was with Nick Roeg and a Gutter, and I was like, okay, so I basically fast forwarded to the bit with the kangaroo hunting scene.
Yeah. Which,
like, man, when that scene came up again, I was like, oh, right, this is probably where RJ took his turn. And like,
well, it's so painful to watch because it goes on forever, and it's not like a quick death or anything. Like, it looks fucking torturous.
Yeah.
Like,
well, see, I think what that scene is, the first time you see it, it's fairly like brief. Like, they don't like linger on it too much. But one of the things they think they do is they reuse the entire sequence of that later in the film, and so you get the sense that he's killing like many. I hope this is the case, but like I think he's killing many kangaroo. But in the actual film, like in the actual production, they killed one. I guess. But okay, so I watched the commentary track. Nick Roeg does not talk over that scene at all. But Jenny Gutter kind of just says, well, it's hard to watch, but she seems okay with it. Like, it seems like there's some sort of strange justification for why it's okay, because I don't know. The one thing that I really don't ever actually hear anyone ever state out front is that it's okay because it's art. No one actually is going to say that, I don't think, but there seems to be this, like, I'm inferring it. Maybe there's an implication that that is the case. So, okay, I started looking up, like, kind of, I did type it in at one point, he's like animal cruelty or okay, or like, what is a justification for animal cruelty? Because I'm curious what someone would say about that idea. I mean, I think there's a problem, though, is like that the when you type in cruelty, it basically implies like a negative. Like it's like if you're calling something like animal abuse or animal cruelty, it's going to be like really difficult to actually apologize for that just because that's what it's called. But I guess it's like, how can you apologize for? Can you make excuses for animal death? Well, of course you can. Yeah. Okay, so another thing with this movie, though, is like there's a couple of YouTube videos with some guys that are talking about animal cruelty in film, and they were talking about Walkabout in one video because the guy's actually Australian, and he is actually on the same page as you, like, pretty well. But the other film that gets talked about a lot in this context, though, is Cannibal Holocaust. But if you compare, though, the amount of talk about Cannibal Holocaust to Walkabout in terms of animal cruelty cruelty discussion defines Cannibal Holocaust. Like, no one makes any qualms about its use in Cannibal Holocaust. It's unavoidable. Everyone talks about it. It's very well talked about. And I think it's because Cannibal Holocaust is only a horror film. If that makes sense, right? And so,
that makes
but with Walkabout, you have a film that Roger Ebert championed. That's part of the Criterion Collection. I just read the one essay in the book that comes with it, and there's no mention of it at all. It doesn't get talked about. People don't want to address that.
They're cowards.
It's tough. Well, it's tough to do, I guess, when you want to talk about this movie by this artist, Nick Roeg, who made like Don't Look Now and A Man Who Fell to Earth. I think in my reading, there's a bit where like someone says that in this film, it's not exploitation. And I was like,
you're gonna have to elaborate on that then.
Yeah, I don't know. See, like I that's all they kind of say. Like, no one really elaborates on defenses on when it happens. People kind of just like their back goes to the wall and they kind of go, oh, I see, but, and then they kind of move past that and they're like, we'll talk about all these other like moments of like beauty or like poetic interest in your movie.
I think that's bullshit. Because, like, frankly, like, I think the way you brought it up is, like, good because you just talk about the stuff you like and then you got to address it. Like, I think anyone who talks about this movie in a positive way and doesn't address that is a fucking coward and it's bullshit. Because you have to talk about these things because it's fucking real. And it's not that it's real in the movie. It's real in fucking real life. And that's why I think it's such an issue for me, is because a lot of times people, like, find justifications for these things when in reality it doesn't exist. Like, it's never justified to do stuff like that. Like, okay, so Nick Roeg wants to show like civilization versus wild. Okay, you can do, you know what, if you were a big filmmaker and you were given a lot of time and you were given money to make a movie, it's your job to find a way to do that in a different way than actually just fucking doing it. Like, that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you're like totally right earlier on when you're saying kind of like it seemed like the 70s was like the prime period of like animal death. I mean, there was like the Italians in particular seemed to like not shy from it at all. Well, because even there's like the Mondo guys, like there's like the one film that you're never going to watch called Africa, Blood and Guts. But in that situation, it's a documentary. And it's supposed to be like stomach churning. And then like in something like Cannibal Holocaust, I mean, I've heard like every justification for why it's okay and like in scholarly ways. Because it seems like in that movie, people will try to like kind of like figure out a way to like defend why it's there. But it's kind of always like, yeah, but at the same time, like, no, it's like that you could have simulated that. Like, you didn't, or you didn't need it. Exactly. But there's like this idea, and like we're gonna start talking about Cannibal Holocaust, I guess. I mean, I love Cannibal Holocaust. I think it's one of the best horror films ever made. I think it's still super effective and a really powerful movie. I will just say it's like I find that I don't have a problem with like animal cruelty in movies at one point, and maybe I've been sort of like toughened to it in some ways. Like it doesn't bother me, but like I haven't watched a lot of these movies since like becoming like a pet owner either. Like, and that's like honestly, like I mean, when I was a kid growing up, I really didn't have a lot of contact with animals, and this kind of leads to like another point I have where. So I guess like living in Western civilization, we're pretty privileged to get to live in a way where we get to enjoy the fruits of others' labors at such a distance that we get to like enjoy the benefit of devouring all the clean, ready to cook, ready to eat animal flesh that we desire. But then at the same time, we're able to like develop like a relationship with animals that's sort of like this distanced way that has like nothing to do with our survival, but at the same time, well, behind the curtain, there's like animals are being murdered, like or killed, however you want to like morally frame it all the time. And I mean, this is the cognitive dissonance that I know, and I get to enjoy that cognitive dissonance every day whenever I fry up a steak, which I enjoy eating greatly. I think like one of the, like two things. So the two things that like I feel that like we're talking about animal cruelty, because Walkabout's not about animal cruelty. Let's just make clear about that. It depicts it. It depicts something called survival, I guess, but we're framing it as animal cruelty. But there was like two films that like really had a powerful effect on me. The first was actually it's a special feature on a Criterion Collection movie, Eyes Without a Face, but the Georges Franju's documentary Blood of the Beasts, which is set in a post-war French abattoir, just showing the like process of like killing cattle and like making like and it is like it's like one of the best documentaries I've ever seen because it's like so effective. It's just like it's like what your modern day PETA undercover video is, but it was made in an era when a director who's a acclaimed filmmaker could walk into an abattoir and just film it going. That wouldn't happen now. Like it's all done kind of like secretly and like it's all covered up, or it's like very controlled by these companies that don't want to deal with like an organization like PETA, which is kind of just opposed to the concept of eating animals, which I am not, I guess. But I mean, also like when I watched the documentary The Cove, which is just like just depicted like the Japanese slaughter of dolphin, which like that's a really strange documentary too, because like I guess like its main point was that like these dolphins are intelligent beings that like understand what's happening to them, and this act is just like monstrous beyond belief. And then people can make that thing where they go, well, you know, those Japanese, they're barbarians, they'll just kill anything. But at the same time, it's like, well, how is that any different from like our cattle industry? And I mean, living in the world that like the part of the world that we live in, I mean, that's like a point of pride is our cattle industry. And it's like it's very easy to like, and it's weird that people fetishize their flesh eating, I guess. Like people, like there was like the big flap in Alberta about like how their beef is delivered to them and whatnot. And so like those conversations about like treatment of animals isn't really being had. It's at the end of the day, it's about jobs and the economy, and it seems like people are more excited about the eating than what happens kind of behind those scenes. And so like when you have when that kind of like crosses this weird line into like film where like you're seeing animals being killed for the sake of art, it's like, well, is this necessary? And it's not like I thought about this a lot. Like I've been thinking about how to like defend what Nick Roeg does, which is like he basically films this like traditional hunter in his environment, basically kill animals. So he's exploiting that aspect to basically say, well, this is how the world is. And I mean, I guess like the closest thing you could make to an argument of why it's okay for this to happen in Walkabout is that I guess it's like it's consistent with the philosophy of the film that it presents, which is just like it's more closer to like a nature documentary, but it's also kind of playing with these juxtapositions of civilization. I mean, there's no good or bad, essentially. It's kind of like it's just so matter of fact, and these are the things that have to happen. And I mean, like there's like people like want to point out like like there's like the aspects of like the failure of communication is a theme in the film. But I
Yeah.
mean, at the end of the day, I don't like, I think like, in this film's world, none of that matters.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like a weird film because in its own defense, it doesn't matter. Like your I guess moral judgments against the film, it doesn't matter to the film.
Hmm.
And like, I guess it's like if these scenes were in a different type of film where like it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, I don't think there's any, like, most films like this don't, okay, movies like this don't get made anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and like you mentioned, it's like no one is killing animals anymore, or at least like
Hmm.
in movies that people are talking about. Like it's pretty rare because if it happened now, people would lose their shit. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, people like go crazy. Like when actors accidentally die, people like kind of hold that against the film. If
Hmm.
like animals started dying for like Hollywood productions, like it just wouldn't go. I mean, I think like part of that was like that reputation haunted like even like Heaven's Gate, and that's like 1980. So there definitely came a turning point. Like it's like, I mean, someone could probably read up more about like the history of like animal protection and animal rights in like the film industry because it's horrific. I mean,
Hmm.
and, like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I
like,
know.
like the Western industry was like brutal to like horses and
Hmm.
whatnot. I mean, like trip lines and stuff like that. But it's like I will still watch those movies, and like I don't even know what. I've been so trained to like not really know what's going on, how they're achieving those effects, other than when it's like, oh, that horse just went off a cliff, like that, like would stand out to me. But like when horses are just going through stunts, it doesn't register as cruel, but I mean it is, and like that's like those are the type of decisions that were being made by film people in a period of time when that wasn't an issue because maybe like at that point in time their relationship with animals was a lot different where they were still seeing this
Yeah.
like weird practical back and forth relationship where I mean yeah you'd be hanging out with your chickens day to day, but when it came to cook a chicken you just went
Yeah.
and killed it, and it was just like that. That mindset doesn't, like, I could never do that.
Hmm.
One of the like anecdotes I'll throw out there is like I remember like when I was like a little kid, I remember like my dad was like on my like grandparents' farm, and like he accidentally shot a squirrel, and
Yeah.
like he was devastated. Like he
Hmm.
like was completely like shaken by this. He didn't like enjoy that at all. He wasn't like, yeah, I killed that little animal. No, he felt really horrible. But I mean, in his day-to-day job, I mean, he was a sous chef. His entire like livelihood at that point in time for like 18 years was like the handling of animal flesh and preparing it. And so I mean there's that disconnect of like and it's like I think a constant thing, especially for like anyone that lives like in the urban environment in the West.
Hmm.
Like you just don't have that relationship with animals. You're not very realistic. And I'm talking about myself here, like not
Yeah.
you specifically, but both of us, like we both have that mentality. And I guess like I mean at the end of the day, I mean, like, I guess, like, I haven't really said what I feel about this movie. I think the movie is like, it's okay. Like,
Hmm.
I don't like it as much as I used to. It's, it's an interesting movie, but,
Yeah.
I don't think your life would depend on watching it ever. I think you can get the same message or like experience from his other films. Um,
Hmm.
and
No,
maybe,
yeah, like I like all his other films. I
yeah,
think those are way better. I would watch any like, well, I'm never gonna watch Walkabout again, but
sure.
like I'd watch any of his other films like any day
Yeah.
because I like those. But like, just to go off of like some of the stuff you were saying, like I agree with a lot of the stuff you're saying. Like, for one, like westerns, I'm not as big in the westerns as you are, but I have a fondness towards them because it's what I watched with my grandparents when I was younger, and like watching them now, that does fucking pull me out of it too. Is like there are certain stunts you can train horses to do,
Yeah.
but then there's certain times where it's like I can just tell because like I've grown up with like horses and stuff like that. It's like, okay, no, they're really doing that. Or like even if it's not like directly, like if they're just like blowing shit up right beside the horse too, like even that I think is touchy. Um, but then like what you were saying with like Cannibal Holocaust, like I think Walkabout is way rougher than Cannibal Holocaust and like
Hmm.
what they're doing to the animals. Like I didn't watch, so like when I watched it, I didn't watch the animal scenes, but I have seen like clips, I get like not clips of the scenes, but like basically like GIFs or like
Suggestions.
screenshots.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
basically what they're
yeah.
doing, right? So, uh, I don't know, like what we were saying earlier, like there's no way to justify it, and I don't think they should either. And it's like you're saying with Walkabout, like this movie's not about that, but like I feel like it needs to be addressed in that sense. And
Yeah.
this will be the only time I bring it up unless it comes up again. But this will be like the one big discussion about it. And like what I wanted to say too, like when you were going over that stuff, like I'm not like naive to this stuff either. Like
Yeah.
I come from a farmer background. Like my entire family's livelihood is based on cattle ranching.
Yeah.
And also the last couple of years of my life, I've been an animal behavior grad student, and it fucking breaks my heart to do some of that stuff. So, like, needless to say, once I'm done with that's like done, I'll never do it again. But what I think like the reason I'm bringing it up is because stuff like that makes me more sympathetic for when I see things like this, and it's not as much of a sense of uh like why they're doing it or anything like that. It's just like, how can you do this in a different way? That's like, one, you don't have to hurt animals. One, you don't have to, or two, you don't have to kill animals. If you got to do it, maybe you can like do it like some other way, like not with a real animal. But it's more just about like, I don't know, like ethical treatment, if that makes sense. Like, just I don't know, stuff like that makes me sad. So that's why this movie makes me sad.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. It's tough to like. What I found really surprising was like in preparing for this, like just like kind of like was the right word for it? Dearth, like just like the lack of discussion about it. Like people will talk about how this is a great film,
Yeah.
and then it's like, okay, so they like it for like obviously for purposes of editing or for like the poetry of the film. I keep using that as a shorthand. It's like, I mean, it's like a dark, harsh poem. Like the film ends on a poem being read or whatever. Like it really brings it home. And I mean, it's like sort of like it's a really dark existential sort of story. And I think it's like not even necessarily the best expression of those ideas.
Right.
But it's tough to. I found it really. I found it interesting and kind of like unfortunate that like people don't know how to talk about that. And like it's like I don't know. Like I really disagree with you though that the film should be edited out or like to me
Yeah,
that's like
that's fair.
that to me is like. That's God. It's like, well, these animals are dead. You might as well leave it in now. Like, if they had to die, I mean, I think it'd be even worse in some ways to like pretend that's not the case.
That
Like,
it's not
well,
there.
the one thing
That's
that's
fair, yeah.
well, there is going to be down the road, Andrei Rublev. Apparently, my understanding of it is that there is some animal cruelty in there involving a horse or a cow being set on fire. Now,
Jesus.
well, see, the thing though is like I think there's a blanket on this cow, but at the same time, like I mean, I guess it's like okay, if you hire a stuntman to like cover himself in like Vaseline and light him up, he has a choice in that, and he got paid. Not
Right.
so much with the cow, but I'm not sure. Like, there's actually, I think there's the two versions of the film, and I think the Criterion version has that scene in it. But there's like actually the shorter version, which is I guess the director's cut. He does not have that scene in it, and I could be wrong. But I mean, so it probably will come up again. But I think like Walkabout, it's like pretty like, I mean, it's intentionally like driven home in that film. Like these are scenes that are definitely upfront rather than like this is how we decided to do the scene because we were kind of foolhardy and like
Yeah.
the idea of like animal being cruel to animals didn't really occur to us like
Right.
in like 1954 in Soviet Russia
Yeah.
and yeah.
No, okay, yeah, I agree. Like that's fair. I agree with you. Like maybe not edit it out. It's just I think the reason I say stuff like that is that's my own inner turmoils and anger coming out in that
Sure.
sense. Like
Okay, 1966 is
but
Andrei Rublev, not 1954. I don't know where that came
okay.
from. Sorry, but yeah.
So, but no, yeah, that's just a little bit of me talking,
Yeah.
not really the film critic
No,
or
hey,
the you know.
it's you know what though, like I mean, I'm of the opinion that's like there's sort of like that weird line that I mean with what we're doing, it's like that weird thing of like what's like the objective way of talking about a film. It's
Right.
that's not interesting. Like
Mhm.
Otherwise, we'd all just like the same things, I guess, over and over and over again. And then it's when you start bowing to like who the experts are. And I mean, it's a
Mhm.
subjective thing. And it's like, I mean, that's the thing with the film. It's like it's really tough to explain away that stuff. So it's like, well, so people
Right.
just don't talk about it. And that's like what it's exactly what happens.
Mhm.
Well, the one thing I wanted to bring up though, kind of I guess moving past it to a certain degree, but then going right back into it was I love when I look up a movie on Wikipedia and it has a legality subheading. So,
Mm.
uh, Walkabout features several scenes of animal hunting and killing, most notably a kangaroo being speared and bludgeoned to death. The Cinematograph Films Animal Act 1937 makes it illegal in the United Kingdom to distribute or exhibit material where the production involved inflicting pain or terror on an animal. So, hey RJ, in 1937, people didn't think it was all right.
So 40 years later, it was they just is that
Well,
why Nick Roeg fucking went to Australia
well,
was to tiptoe around that?
so he can go kill some animals.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that wasn't on his mind, but I mean, that's what Cannibal Holocaust wasn't like available in like unrated in the UK. I think for a while there, or it's kind of slipped
Hmm.
through the cracks because it's on video, and then they cracked down hard, and it was unedited for it was edited for a very long time, or if it were just full out banned because I think it's been whatever it was self-declared banned in 37 countries.
Yeah.
So, since the animals in Walkabout did not appear to suffer or be in distress, the film was deemed to not contravene the act.
That's bullshit.
What do you think of
I
that?
can't.
Because
That's bullshit.
I know for a fact that kangaroo is like making wincing sounds with a giant hole in its side. So
Yeah.
I don't know about that one.
No,
That's yeah okay
that's totally fucking wrong or
yeah
not true.
yeah.
Yeah.
To on the flip side here, we got the film also includes scenes of nudity featuring Jenny Gutter, who was 17 years old at the time of the filming. The scenes did not pose a problem when submitted to the British Board of Film Classification in 1971 and later 1998, since the Protection of Children Act 1978 permitted the distribution and possession of indecent images of people over the age of 16. The issue of potential indecency had not been considered on previous occasions. However, the Sexual Offences Act 2003 raised the age threshold to 18, which meant the
Hmm.
BBFC was required to consider the scenes of nudity in the context of the new law when the film was resubmitted in 2011. The BBFC reviewed the scenes and deemed them not to be indecent and passed the film uncut. Had this not been the case, the film would have been refused classification and it would have been effectively made it illegal to possess a copy of the film, including copies that had been purchased legally at the time, and then the creep catchers show up at your door.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's see, so now I'm glad I fucking got that copy out of my house. Now it's in your house, man.
Yeah,
So you better
no.
watch out.
Well, they've got enough to grab me for already. I've already got a copy of Alan Moore's Lost Girls. That thing is just a
Ooh.
ticking time bomb, man.
Yeah, I've heard about that one.
Yeah, that's the one that's like, huh, I own this, huh?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So anyways, I feel like I focused on the one part of Walkabout and it's not really what I intended, but that's just it's like I think I've said it before. That stuff kind of just pulls me out of movies. So
Yep.
I can't really like yeah, there's scenes I like or like the like certain sequences or shots that I like in this movie and
Yep.
there's a lot of movies I that have good scenes or shots, but sometimes they got stuff in there and it pulls me out and
Well, yeah, I mean,
I don't.
if you like it, it's
Yeah.
like finding something repulsive. It's like, well, they have some other good qualities, but no thanks.
Yeah.
No.
So I don't know. For the people out there, you listen to this and then decide for yourself if you want to fucking watch this movie or not.
I think what we're saying is Cannibal Holocaust wins this round.
I think so, man. I would watch Cannibal Holocaust over fucking Walkabout.
Yep.
Like if I had to watch one like with the animal scenes, I would watch Cannibal
Yeah.
Holocaust over
So we have
Walkabout.
we have a new number 10 in our canon spine, I guess.
Is Cannibal Holocaust?
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool, man. Yeah.
Yep. Actually, I was going to mention too is that I had written down like, yeah, your most popular review on Letterboxd is your rage at the cheapness of the dog death in The Hills Have Eyes.
Oh, I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
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 Do you have that review handy?
Oh, I don't. It's probably right on the
People
start
can-
page.
Yeah,
Well,
people can go find it if they want, I guess. But
Yes.
yeah, that was another day where I was fucking livid. And it's like I said before, it's like I love horror movies, but that is like one thing that always pulls me out of it and then instantly makes it so I think less of that movie. Like it was like I said with Pet Cemetery. If it wasn't for the one scene, like I really like Pet Cemetery. It's a 4-star movie, but it looks like they really fucking like kill that cat. Like I don't know if they did. If they didn't actually kill it, they anesthetize it or something. And even that's fucked up. So like automatically like that just completely dropped that movie off for me. I was like, I can't even enjoy it.
No.
But I don't know.
I guess at the end, I guess like for me, I'm a monster, and like I think I'm just like more offended by like bad filmmaking than that, like because I'm horrible, but at the same time, I'm not like I would like if I was making a movie, it would never cross my mind to like do like kill an animal to like achieve something. It's like, well, isn't there like we can do that another way, right? Like, oh, but it won't be as effective. It's like, no, it will. Most people won't even notice, and like in fact, by doing like what you're suggesting, it would just be like. A terrible idea. It's like I just like it wouldn't fit into anything I would ever do, and like I'll leave that to the real. Too. I'll leave that to the real brave artists who are willing to kill other things to get their point across, I guess. And sometimes, and then usually what winds up happening is it's like not even like it's like oh yeah, Walkabout's like okay, it's like just like okay as a movie. Oh, so I got your Hills Have Eyes review all lined up here.
Oh sure. Because that will never get talked about on this show ever, so I guess this is the time.
Yeah. Listen, if you make a movie that needs to rely on animal cruelty or death to force sympathy, then brother, you and your movie are pieces of shit. Sorry, Wes Craven. I like your other jams. What's that? It's part of the story so the other dog can have revenge? No, fuck that. That's stupid. It's not necessary. Nothing but a cheap ploy to play on people's sympathies. This movie isn't even the worst example I can think of. There are others that actually kill animals on screen, but baby, this is what I watched today, and fuck that.
Yeah, fuck that movie, man. That movie's a fucking piece of shit. Like, I remember, I didn't even know that stuff was in that movie when I popped it in. Yeah, and then I see like so much like, not even like cult praise, but like there's like a contingent of fans for that movie that really like herald it as like a star shining gem from the 70s or like a new wave horror movie or whatever. Like, but man, that movie fucking sucks.
Have you seen like, the giant box set that Arrow is putting out for that?
Yeah, who would fucking buy that?
That's me.
You suck.
I know.
That movie sucks, man.
I have a real like vivid memory of like I really contemplated buying that movie when I first saw it at a store. Like I remember when it came out, like it might have been Anchor Bay or something like that who put it out. And it had this kind of like metallic cover, and it had like what's his name, bulgy-eyed man on the front, bald head, and I was like, oh, it's like I think this movie's gonna suck. Like I don't think it's gonna be that great. Like it's not gonna be like worth $23 when you're only making $6 an hour. And I thought long and hard about buying that movie, and then like I think I finally did buy it because I found it for like $15 at like Walmart of all places.
There you go.
Yeah. I don't know, and like I like it okay. Like it's a 3 out of 5 for me. I don't think it's star. Like I mean like I think Last House on the Left is like overall a better movie, even though it's got like some real stupidity going for it too. But I don't know. Like I said, like simulated dog death all day long. It's stupid and cheap, but I mean it's just a movie. It's movie magic. But yeah, I like I said,
what I think too is like at this point it's such like a trope or a cliche. It's like why even include it? Like it's like I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me, man. I guess that's the whole point of this whole episode. I just don't get it. Yeah.
Well, do you want to hear about from people who hate this movie as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, my brethren.
So we got, yikes, that was meandering and awful and often nonsensical. I don't know. These are the people who just like don't like these type of movies, I guess. Sense. Pretentious drivel that would be laughable as a student thesis. As a Criterion pick, it's fucking ridiculous. Effing ridiculous. Critics love this. I thought it was one of the worst films I've ever not seen. Wait, not seen, you might ask? That's because I stopped halfway through, fast-forwarded, and saw more than I ever needed to see. It's not about crushed spirits of city dwellers or a unique survival film. It's 100 minutes experiment on useless camera shots, revolting imagery, and a story so dull and drawn out that I'd rather watch grass do nothing. Complete garbage. I haven't seen any other Roeg film or any Roeg yet, and I've been really excited to start for a while, but this is utter shite. It's a racist, leering postcard from some Englishmen deigning to shoot a film in the colonies. For those remarking on how visually striking it is, watch Wake and Fright, Fell, Last Ride, anything. This is just not very good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's like the other thing too, is like, I don't know how like, Indigenous Australians feel about this movie. Like, that's another like viewpoint that I don't know. I think there are probably like big fans of like David Gulpilil. They probably love him, and I don't know how they feel about this movie. So that would be another thing that would be interesting, because most of the people I see talk about this movie are usually white critics that don't worry about those sorts of things until they're told to, and then they'll be mad about it. But I mean, there's people who will also talk about Birth of a Nation and saying it's worth watching, and it's like that's not worth watching just because it's like boring. I said it.
There's just boring stuff.
Boring. D.W. Griffith's boring.
Boring.
He's so boring.
There's a PI in my building who's from Australia. I could ask him what he thinks.
Yeah, you'll start out by saying "Good day, mate."
Yeah, I'll bring in all sorts of stereotypes. Give a spoon at him and say that's not a knife, that's a spoon. Things like that. He'll like it.
Yeah, no, pretty well. It seems like people who don't like it just don't really like it because they found it boring. I guess I am like, it's okay. I'd say, I don't know. I have like my memories of liking it a lot kind of still like are in my mind, but I don't know.
Did I poison it for you?
Maybe, because I've had to be like thinking about this film a lot, preparing for this episode.
Yeah.
I just had to like, I don't know. I thought about it, and like, yeah, I don't know. But it's like at the same time, there's just like, there's definitely stretches of the movie that are just like long, and it's like, it's very much a movie of its type. Like, have you watched Don't Look Now yet?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of Nick Roeg movies, actually.
Yeah.
There's only a couple, or not a couple, but the only like big ones I haven't seen, I think, are Performance and Insignificant, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, there's like,
I've seen everything else.
Yeah, Insignificance was the one I was trying to tell you about, where it's like, RJ, it's this movie. It's got like Albert Einstein and Marilyn Monroe in it, and you're like, you're talking crazy, and it's like, no, there it is. I just don't know what it is. But then he actually made a film. He made a movie called Eureka, and I was like, oh, maybe it's Eureka because of Albert Einstein, but it's not. It's Insignificance.
The Walter Matthau one?
Yeah.
Yep.
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 Well, I think we'll leave it right there.